we've got the minutes for 5/3/21. Has everybody had a chance to look at those? Any comments or motions or? I have a motion to accept the minutes from James.
Second.
Al seconds. All those in favor? Aye. The minutes are accepted. Okay, for the regular business meeting right now, we have a request for a special exception. I'll read what the notice says. Stephen Melinda Breaker?
Correct.
Thank you. Public hearing for an application for special exception reference section 32-5, 2A and B for horizontal and vertical expansion of an existing legal non-conforming single-family structure and to permit the construction of an addition to the dwelling that would extend into the shoreland district and encroach onto the 125-foot property structure shoreland setback. The property is located at 19 Moody Point Drive, tax map R2, lot 43-1, zone R1. With that, I'll open the meeting up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. It's good to see you all here tonight, and thank you for having us. My name is, I'm with my own practice now. It's called NH Water Law. And with us here today are Stephen Breaker, who are the applicants and property owners. Also, Susan Ferretra with Ferretra Septic Design. And as well, I see that Mel Proskoff and Hannah are in the audience with us, and I think you have a letter from them in the file. This is a property that is a non-conforming use, as you know from the materials. And the statute, the ordinance allows an expansion both horizontally and vertically in certain circumstances. It's in the R1 and Shoreline Protection Overlay District. This property was built back between 1962 and 1968. From the research that we did, we found a deed that referenced conveyance of the original lot, which was broken off of the Stevens farm in 1961. But the deed says with buildings thereon. And then we see the building in the 1974 air photo that's in your materials. We have the plans here from Boudreaux Land Surveying. It shows that post-construction, the lot will be about 17% impervious. There's photographs along the shoreline, and they're actually moving. There's an encroachment of about 60 feet now within what's called the tidal buffer zone, the 100-foot setback from the river. Portions of that encroachment where there's a deck are going to be removed so that this project, the existing structure, the building will remain, but the addition is going to be 94 feet setback where there's a little deck addition and the building itself to be added, which you can see here in pink. I've highlighted for you the addition, and then the portion to be removed is highlighted in green there. That's set back 100 feet. There's a natural stone wall. There's a silt fence shown here. All of this portion here, and including one really beautiful oak tree, is going to be maintained along the shoreline. It's an absolutely gorgeous property, and my clients are really working hard to maintain that. This project has received the DES shoreline permit. Because portions are within the 100-foot coastal buffer zone, they got that wetlands permit that is required. And on September 20th of 2020, the Newmarket Conservation Commission voted to recommend approval to the DES. One issue that I'd like to bring up right now is that in preparing these materials for you, the site assessment form and some other information in the town's files, which referred to the system having approved plans. What we have since learned was that not all of the system, parts of it that were on the approved plans were built, other parts were not, and what they call an approval to operate by the DES Subsurface or Septic System Bureau was never issued. So we're proposing to remedy that situation, and we've retained Susan Ferretra here today, who can talk about the initial review that she's done, what will need to be done through the permitting process to bring this system into compliance. As best as we can tell, the leach field is the original that was installed. It's a stone and pipe system, probably between 1962 and 1968. If there are questions, I'll take them at any time, but we've gone through the history and the materials. We looked at the building permits that were in the town's files, compared those to the air photos, and kind of walked through the different changes. The building is approved as a 3-bedroom system. With the proposed renovation, actually going to maintain that 3-bedroom approval with the new septic system, but there's only going to be 2 bedrooms because one of the bedrooms will be converted into a studio, artist study. Another's in a library, and then there's a new bedroom that's going to be added. That's the master suite that's being added here. So the net result will be a 3-bedroom approval, but there'll actually be 2 bedrooms that will be there. The criteria for approval that are in the ordinance are that the expanded structure is, and I'm reading from section 32-5, is no closer to the lot line than the existing structure. The project will meet that because, as you can see on the plan here, the existing structure is within 60 feet of the river, and then the addition is 94 feet at its closest point, and then the building will be set back 100. I mean, that's really one of the key parameters or elements of this project is that it's set back pretty much as far as you can locate it. What's going to have to happen, and you can hear from Ms. Ferretra about this, don't take my word for it, I'm not a septic designer, but the existing system is in this area. The construction access runs, and so the existing septic tank is here. The property slopes off. When you get down to Moody Point Drive, there's a drop of about, I'm not going to read it on the plans, but it's about 15 to 20 feet. And because of that slope, it's limited as to how much further back this property could be. Obviously, we don't want it any closer to the shoreline, and we're trying to protect that. The next criteria under the zoning ordinance is it's not in the 100-year floodplain. And let me skip ahead to my notes because I believe the floodplain starts at about 6 feet above. That's the height of the Lamprey River, and the residence will be located at 32 feet. So it's really up on a high and dry ridge. The third criteria is the owner demonstrates that no other expansion which reasonably fulfills the intended purpose can be achieved in conformance with this chapter. And that's very much true. And I'll say that briefly, and I see there is a question. Go ahead.
I have a question. You're probably aware of this, that in January 29th, the FEMA floodplain maps were updated, and we now have 2021 official floodplain maps. And I just wanted to make sure that the site plan properly references the correct maps, and also that the line that's on there represents the current and official maps.
This was in January of this year, you said?
Yes, January 29th
Okay.
is when they're adopted.
This plan is dated September 9th of 2020, so it wouldn't reflect that, but I'm guessing whereas the river is at about 6 feet above sea level and the proposed addition will be at 32, it's really it's quite a distance above. I can't imagine how.
Would like to make sure that we have the correct maps on record, and that perhaps will be a condition placed by the ZBA on the approval.
Okay, thank you. So I was talking about the third criteria, which is that no other expansion is regionally fulfills the intended purpose. This is obviously a very modestly sized development. The addition isn't that large. We're only occupying about 17% of the lot. And as I said, it can't go further back because of the septic area that's needed here. Obviously, we don't want it closer to the shoreline, so this development is really situated in a very unique spot along the top of that ridge. It meets the side setback as well. So I think that's really, it's really in the only place that it can be. I'm going to leave for Susan the fourth criteria, which is that sanitary sewage disposal and water supply are provided if needed. She can talk about the location of the well, the potential options for a replacement system, which we're committing to do here today. What I would like to do, though, is read to you the proposed condition, and if there are questions about that, I'll take them at any time. But what we're trying to say here, and this isn't meant to limit the building inspector or obviate any other requirements that may exist for building permits and the timing of when those are connected. But what we wanted to do is we wanted to come forward with a commitment saying, okay, we found out that this system wasn't lawfully approved when it was updated to three bedrooms. How can we express this in a way to say that we'll go through and put a new system in while trying to protect something that's kind of important, and Susan again will talk about that, the construction access shown on the plan, and then this is where the existing leach field is, but we've got a very tight window between that slope on the north side, the construction access in here, the existing tank, and then the lines that connect through the plumbing. It's going to be pretty difficult to time the construction in such a way that the building is going to have to get built, I think, before the leach field is connected and the new system's built, because obviously you don't want to have two different construction sites conflicting with each other. So with that explanation, what I'm trying to get to is this language that we're proposing, and that's the owner shall obtain DES approval to operate for a minimum 3-bedroom septic system within 1 year of the building inspector's issuance of a certificate of occupancy for the proposed expansion. And then the next sentence that you have before you, it reads, the building inspector may issue one extension of up to 1 year for good cause shown, such as site work, construction requirements, contractor unavailability, or similar circumstances. And this language, it's easy to get caught up in the legalese and think it's proposing to a delay. Really, this year has shown us is that with construction and future events and building materials, you never really know what the future is going to bring. Ideally, what this will happen is the two constructions will be phased together, with one beginning as soon as the next is. And if the building inspector decides, I'm not going to issue a certificate of occupancy until the new system is built, approved, and connected, that's what we'll do. But what this language here is to just give you the certainty that we're going to build a replacement system. We'll get it done certainly within a year, if not sooner. And this language is really meant to make it so that we wouldn't have to come back if we didn't meet that deadline and ask for an extension or a change in the condition.
Just a question to clear something up in my mind. If we do accept that language, what happens what recourse does the town have if for some reason it doesn't get done?
That's a very good question. And
CO in place?
Well, the first thing that would happen is that your building inspector would be aware of it, and he may not even issue the certificate of occupancy if he determines or she determines that it's needed before. That may be how the building code or that requirement plays out. The other thing is that under RSA 676-17, conditions of approval are binding on the applicant, and this one is binding on the owner as well, as we've written it. And if we were to fail to do that, the code enforcement officer could issue a notice of a violation. If we failed to remedy that and the town were to bring a legal action, we're subject to attorney's fees, civil penalties. I've been on both sides of that equation, and I know it's something that this owner and a subsequent owner would do anything they can to avoid, because it's, you end up paying the town's legal cost if you don't comply with that. Obviously, the ideal situation is to have the approval in place and have that presented beforehand, but we were really made aware of this through communications with the town planner on June 4th, that this system wasn't built the way that we thought it was. And so that's why we've brought Susan in. I'm looking at the next criteria, which is I have as number 5, and I've kind of combined the horizontal and vertical criteria into one list. The expansion shall not render the lot proportionally less adequate. And in this case, that isn't an issue, because this structure is going to be set back 94 feet from the shoreline, where the existing structure is 60 feet. And all of the side and rear setbacks are going to be met. The next criteria I have as number 6 is the expansion does not adversely affect abutting properties, public health, safety, or general welfare. And that criteria has been met. I know you have letters from 3 of the abutters who are in support. This is obviously, the addition is, I think, 18 feet high. It's not a big, gigantic structure that's going to block views of the sunset or the water or anything like that. And I think the closest building is 100 feet away from the addition. Criteria 7 in our materials, it reads, if it's an upward expansion, shall not have any adverse impact on neighboring property, not limited to blocking of views or sunlight. We just talked about that. This is really set back so far from the closest building. It meets all the building setbacks. Criteria 8, if it's an upward expansion, which this is, it shall not exceed the maximum height limitations specified in the zoning ordinance. In the R1 zone, the maximum height is 35 feet, and this structure is going to be about 18. So we think this is a great project. It fits well on the site. It's been really well designed. The photos, I don't have to flip through those. I know you have those in your materials, but it really is going to fit right in on a beautiful property. I was out there last week with Ms. Ferretra and the owners, and there were evening grosbeaks, and I think I saw a morning cloak butterfly and some really special, one of my hobbies is identification of native bugs and plants, and this is just a wonderful site for that type of environment, and the owners are committed to keeping it that way. So thank you very much, and with that, I'll let Ms. Ferretra speak to the septic issues. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ferretra Septic Design. I've been a designer for many years, and I took a look at this property last week, and I believe that, take this along. I believe that a replacement septic system will be going in the same general area as the existing one. There is a tight slope here. We don't want to get on that. We've got a well over here. We have a 75-foot radius to it, which comes to right in this area. So I'm going to be digging some test pits and designing a new system somewhere right up in this area. It will meet all the state setbacks. I believe it will meet all of your setbacks as well. Will be beyond the 125 feet, and it will not probably get any closer to the property boundary than this area right in here, on this side, and it will probably be just right in here. I haven't done the test pits yet, so I can't tell you about the soils, but I'm sure they're going to be adequate. And the system will be set up for 3 bedrooms. And the tankage will be adequate as well for that to pass the town and state requirements. Do you have any questions?
And do you have a contingency plan in case you can't find a suitable site within the parameters you've identified?
It's on this side, or right where the existing septic system is. So I've got the whole range of a
Okay.
good part of the front of the yard
All right.
for that. As far as coming back this way, I prefer not to. I don't see any reason to. The plumbing right now comes out and heads in that direction, and that's where we'd prefer to keep it.
Yeah, absolutely. Any more questions, or if you're done your presentation, I'd like to open up the meeting to public comment for anyone here that has wishes to state either for or against the project. We have 3 letters for the file, all of them in the affirmative. For Stephen and Alicia, I'm sorry out there if you're listening, Damiani, Alexander Caprone, and the Proskofts, which are here. So everybody's in the affirmative. If there's anyone out there that wants to take the mic and speak to this, now's your opportunity. One thing I'm not quite clear on is the structure going to be any closer to one of the property lines, lot lines?
The answer to that is yes, it will. As you go here, I think there's an existing plan and a proposed one. I haven't really highlighted for you, but these plans are they're in the 3 plans that are with your materials. The last page here is the existing conditions. I'll start with that one. What you see here in this area is the existing deck, which extends down. A portion of that is being removed, basically where you see the stairs right there. And then there's no building on this side that wraps around. The proposed addition is on this side, and it bumps out, so it gets closer to the lot line. But you can see this line here is the town setback. I believe it's 25 feet, although I can't read it upside down. But the closest building is actually 100 feet away in this direction.
And my concern comes from the fact that the expanded structure is no closer to the lot line than the existing structure. Buffers and, am I?
It is closer. How can you say you comply with that?
No, I'm saying, so,
Well, no, this is for
Give me,
non-conforming structure.
I think there's a little bit of a nuance in the intent of that language. What it's saying, because remember, we're talking about a non-conforming structure.
Right.
And so the non-conformity is no closer to the water than the existing structure. The existing structure is here at 60 feet.
Okay.
We're 94 feet. This portion over here is all completely conforming. Obviously, any expansion would be closer to a lot line, because by making something bigger, it has to be closer to whatever lot line it's moving towards. So that's how I've looked at that, and I believe that's what the intent is, to say that you're not making it more non-conforming. The expansion is actually set back further from the Lamprey River in this case than what exists today.
And everything else conforms with the current setbacks.
That's correct. All of the other requirements are met. There are no variances that are required for this. It's well below the height limitation of 35 feet. It's at 18 feet. Everything is pretty much set to
It says
go.
lot line.
It does say lot line.
It says lot line.
That's right. And remember that section 32-5 is written in general terms for non-conforming structures of all kinds. So we're talking about lot line setbacks as well as shoreline setbacks. In this case, if you think about it, the Lamprey River is a tidal body of water. The bed to the river is actually owned by the state. I think it's a little odd to call it a lot line, but actually functionally it is, because once you get to that high water, you can't put a dock out there without the state approvals going through that process. It is, in that sense, a lot line. Obviously, you don't need 32.5 for a sideline setback if you're in compliance.
So Diane and Mr. Chairman, from what I'm seeing, and this goes along with what you're saying, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong. So this building setback on the right-hand side, it's that dotted line, which is what I'm seeing as would be what the lot line is. And yes, the building does go closer to that, but it doesn't go over it, which means
No.
it's still conforming.
The setback is still conforming.
Yeah, and then the setback to the river, because the existing building is closer, this one's
Right,
further back.
it's further back.
So that's conforming also.
So it's not-
There's no issues with variance or not conforming from what I can tell. Is that what you're
Do you-
saying?
are you
That's
familiar
right.
with that?
We
I
don't
see
need a
what
variance.
Tom's saying. If you read it, if you read it, it says lot line.
It does say lot line, doesn't say whatever the nonconformity is.
Yes,
If it would've said setback, it would've been,
I don't see anything wrong with
No, I
what
don't
they're
either.
doing, but if you look at the language,
It is tricky.
if-
I agree.
I think the language needs to be corrected.
it seems to me that this is
Next time
set
they
up,
do the recodification, we'll do,
to ask for a variance from that specific item.
no, it's a special exception from the shoreland protection,
Right.
which is
No,
this.
that's not shoreline protection, that's the side buffer.
Yeah, but they meet the side buffer requirement.
Yeah, but
It's
they're
25 feet.
not
Correct.
closer to the
Yeah.
property line.
Right, and that's why I say, but
They need,
they're within 25, they're outside of 25 feet, they meet
the buffer.
They meet the current setback. They're not, that's not what the nonconformity is. The nonconformity is the shoreland protection. That's why the building is nonconforming. So he's building his addition further away from the shoreland protection zone, and, which is the reference line, which is the state. Boundary line.
Where do you get that? I mean, I understand what listening to what you're
Can I
saying.
sneak in and just,
Yeah.
what I'm talking about is, okay, this is non-conforming because it doesn't, where's the setback? Okay. You can't be within 125 feet of the tidal buffer, okay? And you see that the building
Yeah.
goes right through the buffer zone goes right through the middle
And
of it.
that's what they're
Okay,
asking
and
for a
that's why it's
special.
non-conforming. They're not non-conforming because it's a setback request.
It-
You measure from this is called the high tide line, which is also called the reference line. Our setback requirement is 125 feet, which is right there. And the addition is well away from where the nonconformity is in the structure.
Okay, what I'm saying is we put this down on Cedar Street and read the same thing. And if they were going closer to the property line,
Well, on Cedar Street, the houses are built very, very close to the property lines, and they probably don't conform. This is not non-conforming because of setback requirements, the traditional building setback requirements.
Are you
I
saying
think-
they need another variance for the lot
I
line?
don't believe they do.
I don't know.
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I think the answer is actually in the wording of the ordinance. I've pulled it up in front of me here. I'm looking at 35, or 32-5, 2A1. That's the sentence we're talking about.
Correct.
And it says the expanded structure is no closer to the lot line, not all lot lines. When it says the, it's referring back to the non-conforming aspect. Obviously, any expansion would be closer to some lot line somewhere. That's not what this is meant to do. It's by using that definite article, plural of lot lines, or, is not closer to any lot line, that would mean you couldn't expand anything. This is just meant to refer back to that piece of it. It is confusing, and I remember writing this, going through that same process that you're going through, but that's the conclusion that I reached at the end of the day.
And the definition of word is.
Are we on, we being recorded right now?
Yes, oh, yes.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Mr. Breeker wanted me to mention after I sat down that the existing system that's been there since like 1965 or so is our understanding. It's working fine. It has been regularly pumped and inspected by Mr. Grant, is that correct? And there haven't been any issues. It's not in failure or anything like that. So we're expecting that it'll continue to function as it should until this project moves forward, and then it gets replaced as part of that.
One second. Before we go any further, I don't have any public comment coming in, so we'll close the public comment portion of this. And
Go
Al,
ahead,
you
yeah.
got a question?
Question on the septic system. What is the issue with getting the septic system updated at the same time this project's being built?
Access.
That's correct. If you look at this first plan here, I haven't highlighted it very well, but in red, it shows construction access, and it's basically going right across through here. And the problem is with a slope on this side, if you were to remove materials, you'd have to put them somewhere. You'd have to, backfill. It's really tight. So what's going to happen is that the whole project is basically going to have to be pretty well underway before a contractor can come in and start to build this system. It's really a question for Susan to answer, though, because I'm not
You'd have to just
qualified
work
to
it
talk
out.
about how these
Work
things are
out.
built. And what
Finish
the,
there and work out.
You don't want to be putting spoils any closer to the water, so the only place you can put them is on the uphill, upgradient side.
Okay, thank you.
is it, did I,
Diane?
Yeah, I explained to Justin earlier today that in Newmarket, we rely on DES and their permitting system for septic systems. We don't have a local ordinance that's more restrictive than the state requirements, so we really defer to DES. So when somebody comes in, we want to make sure they have their DES subdivision approval, we want to make sure they have their construction approval, and it is the town's policy that before we can issue a certificate of occupancy, we have to have the operational permit in place. Now, to me, it's not a violation of the town's laws per se, but it sounds to me like we have a violation of the state law. With all due respect, I'm not trying to, just raise issues for the sake of it. I mean, is this an enforcement issue with DES? There's no operational approval.
What
And-
happened back,
And Wayne, go ahead.
well, what would happen back in the early nineties would be you would put a septic system in, and they had, I believe they had operational approvals then,
They did.
but the towns and state didn't enforce it, so what they gave you was an okay to backfill. And that would suffice. You'd go ahead, backfill, and you'd go on your way. probably in the early 2000s, towns started for their occupancy permit requiring approval for operation. And then now it's a standardized, am I correct, Susan?
And that, I
Yeah.
wanted to confirm that, thank you. Wayne, by the way, in his former life, he's now retired, but he was an excavator, and he did put in septic systems here in town. And he's very familiar with, the state operations and so forth, so he speaks from a lot of experience on this, so I just wanted to make reference to that.
I have one thing.
Go ahead.
On your proposed condition, I think we should change that from owner shall, make it like, just like a new construction. You have to get your approval for construction before the building permit is issued.
Right.
And then you do your job, and within a year, you finish your septic system and you're okay. So get an approval for construction before building permit is issued.
Right.
I think that is the plan, because obviously you don't want to build the addition without knowing where the system's going to be. I only used the operational approval because that's the piece that was missing here. And to get the operational approval, we would have the construction approval. So that was the thinking, is that that's the end result that is needed. But
But you could get the approval for construction after you start the construction. You could do that.
yes,
And still get the operational approval. I'm just saying, get your approval for construction and then your building permit.
I don't see, let me turn to my client, but I don't see a reason why we couldn't add the word to construct and operate to cover both. Obviously, the construction approval is going to happen way before the operational approval, but would that address your concern by having both those?
No, I think it should say, get your approval for construction before you get your building permit.
permit, and then
Just like you-
operational before you get your certificate of occupancy.
That's correct, yeah.
I mean, that's
Oh, so
what
you're talking about a
process should
separate
be.
condition to say,
Yes.
do that, and
Yes.
I don't,
Yeah.
that wouldn't be,
Just like
offensive, yeah.
if you were
Yeah.
building a new house,
Yeah, and we've obviously just engaged Ms. Ferretra to do this work, to come up with a design, get a test pit done, and all that is obviously just beginning, but it's underway so that we can get this issue, because then there's things like, just the final design of the site that are obviously contingent on where the leach field is, where there's an underground electric utility. There's a bunch of different components that need to be looked at to get everything in place in a way that makes sense.
and that's why I think you should have an approval for construction before. I mean, I don't think this is the case, but suppose the only place that you can put this new septic is where the addition is going. That would kind of,
That
I
would
don't
be
think that's gonna happen.
Gratuitous.
The well's right next to it.
Yeah,
So that would
that's
probably
not gonna
knock it out of the
happen,
park.
yeah.
All right.
I just think it's the right order of things, that's all.
No, absolutely, and this was really only meant as a backstop to say, we're gonna get to the end, but that's, that would be acceptable to include that as well, and that's our intent.
Yep.
Thank you.
Can I say one more thing?
Go ahead, Diane.
Just, I wanted to thank Mr. Richardson for putting together an excellent presentation. It was one of the most thorough applications I think we've seen
Yeah.
in a long time. And I really wanted to give him kudos, if you will, for doing a great pitches. Everything was clearly spelled out. It was very, very well done, and I wanted to acknowledge that. Thank you.
And I think we came out with something else, that we should rewrite that section 1 of the ordinance
Yes.
to read that the expansion shall be within all applicable setbacks.
Right, and in this case, that's a good, very good point. It's already written. Perfect. Well,
And the question's gonna have an obvious answer. So I was
that's I think, a question that maybe, I've not spoken with Mr. Breeker or Ms. Breeker about. I don't know the reason they're planning to do that. Do you?
Well, the main reason is we're both going on past 70 and want to live here.
I'm with you. Well,
As much on one floor as possible.
I just had to ask a question because you're certainly, I'm the
And-
exact same situation. I got you.
And I think the majority out there are basically single story. If haven't been out in a while, but
They are.
so it would be kind of out of character for the neighborhood.
And remember, there is that, I mean, that hill, I mean, this, we've got the Lamprey River down at 6 feet. This addition starts at the ground level at about 32. You put 2 stories up, it's gonna, it would look like a castle, I would think, and that, yeah.
Well, it is
Beauty's in
their
the eye of the
castle. It's
beholder,
their
but
home.
that's,
Thank you.
thank you, appreciate your questions.
Okay. With that being done, we've been pretty much discussing openly over here. Now's the time for the discussions amongst ourselves. What are we, if you've made your mind up, I can appreciate the attorney's comments on item 1 of 5-2, and I think he's convinced me that it's the distance to the critical line, so I've got no problem with that. Does anybody else have anything they want to bring up, or I'll entertain a motion?
I'll move to accept the application as listed.
I second it.
We should have the conditions added to it.
Yes.
With the amendment.
With the
Okay. And that the submittal be included as our finding of fact.
that too. He's done this a lot better than I have.
I learned from the best. I learned from Chris.
I second it.
Wayne seconds it. Okay, roll call vote. Steve?
Aye.
James?
Aye.
Al?
Aye.
Aye. And I vote aye. You have your setback, you have your exception. Thank you for bearing with us. It's just, we've got to vet some of these things, so thank you. We do have room for an alternative member on the board here, so careful what you wish
We have 4 people
for.
back there who could be doing it.
Careful what you wish for. Okay, I don't think we have anything else in terms of business on the agenda.
No, I think we're all set on that. I'm still trying to,
No old business, no new business?
I'm still trying to remember the name of the gentleman who submitted his application, and I failed to remember it. But
That's fine, there's a
it's on
gentleman.
the agenda for, I think, the next council meeting. So for the next meeting, we'll probably have another board member
So if
present.
you don't have any business to adjourn, is in order. Al, James, all those in favor? Aye. It's unanimous.
Excellent. Thank you.